I got into top US business schools with a scholarship. As an international student, I feel very lucky to have graduated with no debt. Today, I will share with you how I successfully prepared my business school applications, what I would do differently, and words of encouragement. Your time is precious, so feel free to skip ahead to sections that speak most to you. But if there's anything that I forget to cover, please leave your comments below so that everyone can see and I'll get back to you and answer your questions. And please note that I tend to be a little crazy and intense. I submitted my applications well before the deadlines and prepared all 4 applications in round 1. My sister took a more casual approach and got accepted to Columbia Business School. So I hope the tips I share with you don't freak you out. I am not an admissions consultant. I am just here to help. Let's nail down the minimum requirements, the GMAT, and your resume. There are 8 key points that I want to share about the standardized exam. Play to your strength and choose what's good for you. I took the GMAT because the exam was much shorter and I knew math was more my strength. So instead of memorizing vocabulary, I decided to stick with the GMAT and go for it. Here's a quick chart to compare the differences between these 2 exams. When taking the practice exams, take it very seriously. Try to mimic the actual experience as closely as you can. I didn't go for bathroom breaks, no chewing gum, drinking water. I also bought 2 exam laminated papers and used one for quant, another for verbal. And I also bought disinfecting wipes so that I can wipe them down during my 5-minute breaks. Do yourself a favor and solve only the official guide problems. I initially thought that it was going to be smart for me to learn the concepts and then try to prepare for the exam. The better way around ended up being solve practice exams, see where your weaknesses are, and then focus on those areas. Don't spend time on non-official guide exams. Apply the 80-20 rule here. Focus your time on what matters. I made my own study guide for the verbal section. If your second language is also English, like me, drop a comment below and I will share my notes with you. I highly recommend making your own study guides too, because that's one of the best ways to internalize the information. Once I started using an error log, that's when I started to see my score improve. In fact, I got a perfect score on the math portion of the exam. Here's a screenshot of what my error log looked like. Feel free to use it or mix it up to see what works for you. If you really want to get an MBA, make studying a priority. To maximize my performance, I took the exam on my birthday, so it's like a gift to myself. My sister took it the day before our Christmas trip, and we wanted to make sure that when we leave the test center that both of us will be smiling. We took it very seriously and got the same score. Taking the GMAT is probably the easiest part of the application process. At least with the GMAT, once you take the exam, your score will pop out, you know exactly where you stand, and then you can decide whether you want to take it or keep that score. With essays, you never know when you're done because there are no right or wrong answers. But we'll get to that pretty soon. I'm not saying that I'm a great test taker. In fact, I took it many times. And at one point, my score dipped. That wasn't going to stop me. Be more strategic with my times. Make sure I cut off any distractions and things that no longer serve me. I also wrote a lot of positive affirmations on my study guide here too. Don't give up. If you don't give up, you won't fail. Now, 8 key tips for your resume. The purpose of the resume is to get a full picture of who you are as a person. What are the stories that you decide to tell? Are you professionally ready? Are you polished? I googled resume templates for School X and used that as a starting point. This is the gold standard, 1 page, no exceptions. For your resume, I highly recommend this order. Start with your experience because that's the biggest chunk of your resume. Next is your education, and last but not least is the other section. Unless you're still in school, education should be your second section. On the final section, I used the word community because I wanted to emphasize that I'm the type of person who likes to bring people together. Try to bring out your personality here too. No acronyms, no jargons, at least 11-point size fonts. Don't play around with margins. Margins left and right 1 inch. Top and bottom 0.5. Times New Roman, Arial Georgia works fine too. Consistent format, do not repeat words. Use AI resume reader here. And do your best to convey the information concisely. No one-word hobbies. Like when you say sports, what about sports? You like sports? You like playing sports? What type of sports? Be very specific and help the readers understand. You should have more bullets for jobs that you had longer and fewer bullets for jobs such as internships. And this makes logical sense. So when you look from far, it just naturally flows. Don't have your GMAT, your schools already have that score. No photo, no link, no date of birth, my preference, no underlines. I feel like underlines mess up the look and feel of your resume, and I prefer italics. If you want to write your top ranked at work, it's much better off if it comes from your recommenders, because otherwise it's like, oh, look at me, I'm so great. And And it's much stronger if those compliments come from someone else than from yourself. Especially for people who's coming from finance consulting, don't try to create categories under what projects and deals that you were part of, because what matters more is the impact that you brought within that project. The deals and the size of the projects you were on doesn't matter. Little to do with you. Make it more about you, which goes to my next point. One partner that I really respect asked me, Yujin, what does leadership mean to you? And he defined leadership as impact. This is something that I think is very applicable to your resume. Every single bullet on your resume should be results driven and also include what you did to get there. So a structure that I really like, results plus comma, a quick description of what you did. And here's also my favorite bullet that I revised for confidentiality. Also, this is not a job description. To get into one of the best business schools, you want to make sure that you convey how you stand out among your peers. The first bullet under each job should be the most impactful. Give that little power punch to the admissions committee. I suggest working on your resume after your essays, especially when you have a brain freeze and you don't want to write essays anymore, but your resume should be ready before you talk to your recommenders. I'll get to that later soon. Now let's talk about how to polish your career goals for the admissions committee and your recommenders. You want to start with a strong foundation. This section is actually where I want you to start first, even before writing your essays and your resume. Having a strong sense of your direction is going to be very important. There are two elements that make a great career goal. Be specific and be achievable. To be specific, give names of the job title, the types of company, the role, the function, and regions that you want to be part of. You have the elements to achieve that goal. Your job is to make it easy for the admissions committee to understand your career goals. And the best way to do that is connect the dots. Your job right now plus MBA equals your short-term goal. There are two types of career goal, the short-term goal as well as the long-term goal. And short-term goal should focus on the first job you will have straight out of business school. Long-term, think about 10 years out post-MBA, the type of work that you want to be doing in your late 30s and early 40s. Try these exercise with 50 words. A word of caution is have one single career path, not multiple for different schools. You don't want to give the impression that you are wishy-washy. Good leaders are decisive. Schools are aware that career goals can change. It's very natural. For instance, I never realized I would ever start a company, but that was one option that I explored in business school and pursued for about 9 months before going back into consulting. Also, try to save your career goals and revisit them when you're in school, because you'll realize and be surprised how much you have changed and evolved over time. Why this goal could also be baked into your career goal as well. Doing an accomplishment exercise will be helpful for your resume as well as your interview later on. So don't skip this step. This is an 8-box method I created while I was in school. STDARCIL. Works very well, and I highly recommend you write it down on a letter sheet paper and try practicing your stories as well. Having about 3 stories is a good start. One way to communicate who you are as a person is also to be very selective in the stories that you choose to tell. Situation. The reader doesn't know you yet. How old were you? What company were you in? When did it happen? Give me a full laydown of what the situation was. How did the problem arise? Be very specific. And when the problem happened, what was going on inside your head? Walk us through the feelings and the thoughts that you had. And what did you do to try to resolve this problem? Did you talk to people, collect data around it, or immediately went for it by yourself? Alternatives. What were some other ideas that was in your head? And why did you decide on that one specific solution? This is an opportunity to show that you're a very logical thinker. Weigh the pros and cons. This part is what makes the story exciting and interesting. What was at stake? Let the readers know, did the risk profile change over time? Did the tension between the team also intensify? Give more context and make it really clear to the reader so that they know what you were dealing with. Did you have to persuade someone? Did anyone try to push back on your opinion? And how did you persuade them that your solution was a way to go? This section is great to emphasize your interpersonal skills, your soft skills, and your team management skills too. What was the end result? Was there a lasting legacy? Last but not least, what did you learn? It's a great way to show your sense of maturity. Another way to say this is, if I were to do it differently, instead of doing X, I would do Y. The stories you want to use in your MBA essays are the ones that show how you added significant value. And one way to communicate who you are as a person is choosing what stories you tell about yourself. Here are 8 tips on writing your application. Start by answering the question. Can you read the direction? That's what they're testing. By now, all application forms should be out. I remember they came out around June. And what I did was I went inside the forms, copy pasted all the questions in a separate Google Doc. And I did this for two reasons. One, easy version control. Two, checking your spelling mistakes. By the time you come around to submitting your application, it's going to be very hectic and you want to make sure you copy paste things in to reduce the mistakes. Sometimes school even have video form essays, so make sure you take note of all the requirements way in advance so you can plan accordingly. I treated essay writing as like my full-time job on top of my consulting job. On the weekends and before and after work, I was always writing essays and thinking about my life and what's important to me. I wrote all my essays from scratch and did not reuse a single essay. The story I want to share is one time I went on a date and he said, "You have beautiful eyes." But something kind of felt off, and it turns out that he used the same compliment on my friends. My story to you is, let's not reuse compliments, do not recycle your essays. Readers can tell. When you have a brain freeze, use this time to explain a gap in your work experience. Think about what you want to write in your optional essays. It's fine to explain anything that you feel like need additional detail. I thank my sister and online essay editors for reviewing and revising grammar, story flow, and voice. I wanted to make sure that my essays sound like myself in words. Remember to thank people. During my application process, there were so many people who helped me with my resume, my essays, my recommenders, of course, as well as people who helped me decide my decision on which school to go to. Towards the end, I had over 75 people to thank, and I shared them my progress, my results. This is my way of giving back too. Be very careful when you're reading other successful essays because you don't have their full application. You don't know their GMAT score, you don't know their profile, you don't know what type of jobs they have, or even their recommendation letters. Essays is just one portion. It is a very important piece of the application, yes, but it's not the whole story. Instead of reading other essays, I read autobiographies and biographies for inspiration. Try to spend about 20 hours on your first school application without multitasking. Focus here. Your first school application will not be perfect. And for your first school, choose the one that you think is the most straightforward. For instance, this is the order of schools that I applied. I feel like my second application was my best, and then by the fourth one, I was burned out. I didn't want to do it anymore. And finally, did you answer the question? Do your homework and know what you're going to pitch to each of these schools before you talk with your recommenders. I gave them a one-pager, and this is what I included. The first section was on the deadline. Next was on the context of how long we worked together and which projects. In the middle was the short-term and long-term career goals, suggestions on qualities to highlight with specific stories, and last but not least, which I think is really important, feedback I received from the recommender and how I responded. Schools also have different requirements and questions for recommenders, so make a note of that and make it really easy for your recommenders by creating what questions are overlaps and how the questions are phrased differently. Here's an example of a matrix that I created. I asked two of my direct supervisors that I really respect at my consulting job, and I owe them big time for giving me such a great opportunity. So make sure to thank them later, even when you're in school. I asked in person, if not, Zoom is fine too. And I shared my career goals, and this is a question I asked verbatim. Would you be excited to write a strong letter of recommendation letters for me? If they can give you an immediate yes, that's the person you should work with. I handed over a package that I printed out in a really nice sheet of paper. And those three things were: 1, my resume; 1 pager about me; 3, a 1-pager matrix that I mentioned just above. So hand it over to them. Your recommender is going to be very busy, so be respectful and mindful of their time. I made sure that I asked early enough. When the application opened early June, I had my resume ready and handed those materials to them. Last but not least, there's also going to be ranking grids. What I think are the most important qualities here: integrity and teamwork. I don't think I want to ever work with someone with a low integrity or low teamwork score. I will make a separate video on this if I see enough demand. For reference, there are 3 different types of interviews. One led by the alumni, a group interview, and another one led by the admissions committee. I've been there before. Stop comparing yourself, reading all those poets and quants, GMAT club, seeing all these different rankings on MBA. They change over time, and really it doesn't matter. I am not disclosing my stats because I'm afraid that someone might be like, "Oh, Eugene scored this and that," and compare yourself. It's not healthy for you. You are uniquely you. Be bold about asking for help, but be very strategic. MBA students have a crazy busy schedule. Their time is going to be limited. And when you do ask for help, be very specific on what your request is. Most of the times, all the information that you want is going to be available on the school website or through the school Instagram page and YouTube channels. So use that first before you reach out to students. While attending school-sponsored admission events seems like a good idea and it's a great way to show eagerness, it's not a guarantee that you will get an interview invite. And know that your application is more important than talking to one additional person. I used to call free admissions consulting. A lot of people told me like, Yijun, you're trying to go too high. You're going to be set up for disappointments. But I didn't let that stop me. When people tell you those things, I feel like those are negative energy that feeds into you. So I suggest moving in silence. You don't have to share it to the world that you're going through the business school application. Sometimes not everyone's going to be very supportive, but I want to make sure that you shove off those negative energy. All for you and believe in you. You already have what it takes to get into a great business school. It's all a matter of execution. I've always also wondered, like, am I enough? And let me tell you today that yes, it can be grueling. I cried for the first time in the bathroom during work. But please remember that there is light at the end of the tunnel. What is meant to be will all work out. If getting an MBA matters to you, you will find a way. And let me know how it goes. There's a lot of information I still want to unpack. I'll be back with another video. Until then, stay healthy and good luck!